I'll never forget how I felt as a 22 or 23-year-old, very young mother, sitting in on Francis Schaeffer's first video series called How Should We Then Live? I had been an economics major at Furman. I had been a serious student of the Bible, I felt like, for my high school and college years. And I heard him make the statement that there is a biblical perspective on economics. It was like a bomb exploded in my mind. And I thought, is this guy a nut or what? There couldn't be a biblical perspective on economics because I grew up in the church. I've been reading the Bible, and nobody has ever told me there's a biblical perspective on economics. So as he goes through this 12-week series or however long it was this absolute angst type experience as I realized that so many of the premises and principles I had built my life on were not biblical. And it was like realizing that I had to train my brain to rethink every thought I had ever had. It was really a watershed moment for me. And it was also my first exposure to the word worldview. Now we toss that word around all the time and it's very common, but world and life view was one of these newer concepts that was being introduced to the church. I just remember what a painful experience that was for me, but what a growing experience that was. So one of my heart passions in homeschooling is that we teach our kids what a biblical worldview is from the time they're old enough to talk and listen, so that when they leave home, they understand totally how worldview shapes their thinking, how biblical principles apply to all of life, academics, social and moral decisions, what I do every day. We don't want our children to leave home and be shocked by the secular culture. So what is worldview? I was teaching a worldview class in my co-op, and I had to be absent for several classes because of an injury my son incurred in Chattanooga. So I'll never forget that I had to get this substitute on a Monday night to teach my class Tuesday. So I called dear friends of mine and I said, Sandy, would Steve teach my worldview class tomorrow? He's been traveling to India. He brings a businessman's perspective on sharing the gospel and a cultural situation, and it would be so great. She said, sure. So I got back the next week and I just wanted to check in with them to see how the class had gone. Was there anything I needed to know before my second worldview class? And Sandy said, oh, it was great. And Steve agreed to teach the class, and after we hung up talking to you on the phone, Steve looked at me and said, okay, I'll teach it, but Sandy, what's worldview? And so that's where we are as Christians sometimes. We know we need to teach this, but we don't know what it is. So bear with me a minute. I just want to share a couple of definitions of worldview with you that have been transforming and important to me. The first is very simple, and this is by Charles Colson. Worldview is simply the sum total of our beliefs about the world, the big picture that directs our daily decisions and actions. So, all right, this next definition is by Dr. David Noble, the founder of Summit Ministries, and it's a little more detailed. Worldview refers to any ideology, philosophy, theology, movement, or religion that provides an overarching approach to understanding God, the world, and man's relationship to the world. What he does that I love is then he talks about the 10 academic disciplines that are included in our Christian worldview perspective: theology, philosophy, biology, psychology, ethics, sociology, law, politics, economics, and history. This part of it is particularly important for us as parents because as our children grow up, we need to be able to interpret all of life, including the academic disciplines, to our children. We need to be able to explain to them, no, Pocahontas is not a Christian movie, and here's why. But we also need to give them the understanding that there is a biblical perspective on law, on history, on economics, so that when they are entering that secular college classroom or their first job or they're launched into the world, they understand these things. So I wanted to read you those definitions so that you could get a view for how we're talking about worldview today. Worldview is important, I think, for two reasons. First, it gives us focus and it gives us direction. And it also gives our children focus and our children direction. So just assume that in your worldview wanderings, you're going to be a student with your child in the area of worldview like you've been a student with your child in so many other areas. We can't be intimidated by the challenge. We just need to determine, yes, we're going to learn with our kids. I can remember when I was in the 4th grade, you know how you would go to the school cafeteria in public school and you would have your eye exams and you'd have to say which way the E's are pointing? Well, I went in the 4th grade for my eye exam and the nurse says, okay, honey, which way are the E's pointing? And I said, what E's? So she goes to the next row and I said, no E's there. So we got to the last row. And the only thing I could read with squinting was the big E. So she says, honey, you are practically blind. So, of course, I tore off to my mother's classroom and I screamed, I'm blind, I'm going blind, Mama. And she took me immediately to the eye doctor, and I was not quite blind, but had very poor vision. I'll never forget the first time I got that first pair of glasses. They're not the cute little designer glasses kids have today. They were the Coke bottle bottom glasses. But we went to a toy store. It was Christmas time. And I remember putting them on and saying, Mom, I can read the labels at the end of the aisle. Mom, look, you can see people's faces this far. Well, that's what giving a biblical worldview does for our children. It's like the world makes no sense. Then they put on the lens of Scripture, and the world comes into focus. So as our children age and as they grow, we need to make sure that we're incorporating worldview, the application of Scripture to life, into everything we do. Then the second purpose of worldview is to give our children direction.